Welcome to PK Woodworking. It has been a bit, I apologize. Lots of stuff going on. If I could pan around here, you'd see there's lots of packing and lots of things going on in the shop right now. But the reason why I'm coming to you today is something that's a little different than I normally talk about, and it's because of something that happened last week. I went to something called the Alpine Workshop, which is a really cool kind of intensive, between like 3 and 6 people, and you get to learn a lot about how to use one of these bad boys, a shaper back here. And so during that week that I spent there, I kind of honed down on what my ultimate shaper setup really needs to be. Originally, I had posted this Format 4 shaper up for sale and planned on selling it to get one ultimate shaper that did all the things that I wanted to do, which hopefully by the time we get through this long video, you'll kind of understand what was the ultimate setup that I was looking for. But the cool part about going to an event like that Alpine Workshop is you kind of get to ask all the appropriate questions to figure out what you really want. Is one shaper that does everything like the ultimate be-all? Well, I guess it probably would be if I had a smaller shop. The newer shop that I'm going to be moving to is a little bit bigger, and it gives me a chance to reorganize the way I put all of the machines so that I could have 2 shapers. And so what's the advantage of having 2 shapers besides just blowing a bunch of money? Well, the advantage for having 2 shapers is you could have them set up for things that you're doing at the same time. So one set up for, say, raising a panel for a door, and the other one set up for something like stiles. Or you could have one set up for rails and one set up for stiles. And then you can go back and forth and hopefully make yourself a little more efficient along the way. But I think I had some other things that I wanted to get to do that. And so I've kind of changed my mind because of that, and I'm keeping the Felder Format 4 Profile 45. It's going to be my tilting shaper, so I can do some of the cool things that you do with a tilting shaper, like with moldings and with profiling and stuff like that, which you don't do often. But if you don't have a tilting shaper, then you really can't do it without putting some crazy things down on the boards, etc. But what's this video going to be all about? This video is about what do you do when you start shopping for a shaper? Like, what are the possibilities in shapers? And why would you even want one to begin with? I'm breaking in right here. This video is going to be long. There's going to be all kinds of information. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable right now. First of all, subscribe. Second of all, in the comments below, if you've got questions, if you've got things you want to say, if I'm saying something wrong, please get in there and say something so that everybody has a wider idea and understanding of what this is about. Because there's some stuff on the web about and YouTube about using shapers, not a lot about how to buy one or why you'd buy a certain kind of a shaper. So please, in the comments below. I also want to call out Raingate, which I buy a lot of my tooling from. They don't sell those brazed cutters, but they sell a lot of index cutters, and the rest of the cutters, well, not this one either, but the other 2 cutters and another cutter I have are all from them, and they're the best quality, and I just am happy every time I interact with them because their customer service is amazing too. But I am not sponsored, so let's go back to the video. Okay, so first things first, routers can do a lot of things that a shaper can do. They just can't do them as well. The difference is that if you're running a shaper, that the motor is definitely going to be more powerful than the motor that's in your router. It's also not going to slow down like your router motor slows down when you start into a cut. And then lastly, because the cutters are larger, the tip speeds are different and gives you more chance to cool the cutter as the cutter is moving. You get less burning, and because of the weight of the machine, you get a smoother finish. Some of the finishes that comes off some of these cutters that I've got right here are so smooth you really don't need to do any kind of sanding after you're done. You're ready for finish, you're ready to go. What I want to talk about is all of the categories that exist in shapers so you can kind of understand where you start and where you go. So first things first, I put them into 4 categories. I made myself a little written thing so I can remember these as I go through, because there's a lot to be thinking about when you're talking about looking for a shaper. I'm going to talk about new, and I'm going to talk about used. Where do you look at for used, like woodworking stuff? Facebook Marketplace is actually probably the most prolific right now. Used to be Craigslist, but I would say Facebook Marketplace has probably taken over that. There's also OfferUp, which is some places it's good, some places it's not as good. I would say Facebook Marketplace is better. Craigslist is still good in some places. There are other things out there also. You can do the Google search if you want to. I'm not gonna give you all those brands and give them for free. But there is something, if you live in kind of like the Utah, Idaho, Nevada-y area, there's also something called the KSL there, which if you know, you know. But that's where people post a lot of machines there. So there is the ability to buy lots of new stuff, and there also are some great deals on used things out there. You can say that in some cases you can find cream puffed used shapers because people buy them and they definitely don't use them as much as they probably should or could. And then they find that they, over time don't use it as much as they want. They sell them off, and that's good for you if you want a shaper. So let me break it down into these 4 different categories, and I'll kind of explain back and forth what that looks like. Okay, first thing, I call that hobby class or the older class of shapers. So what do I mean by that? They're definitely going to be smaller. Some of them not much bigger than a drill press or so. Like, they're not very large. The cast iron countertop that are on them, if they're cast iron, probably not much bigger than maybe 18 by 24. Some of them have open stands below where the actual stand of the machine is not fully closed. They're definitely lower horsepower machines, and they're usually 120 volt machines. They're not 240 volt or 3-phase. They're definitely going to be into that 2 horsepower and less kind of category. Most of them are going to have smaller spindles. So this is the spindle right here on a shaper. It's the part that the cutter goes down upon. And most of those machines are going to have, some of them even 1/2 inch or 5/8, but that's kind of crazy. That's just the same thing to me as a router. But 5/8, 3/4 of an inch, maybe 1 inch kind of spindles. Cutters are going to be a lot less expensive. So you're looking at a cutter, something like this over here. So, that's kind of what you get for those kind of things. They probably aren't able to have a power feeder on them. Maybe the smallest of power feeders. This power feeder right here, like, it's heavy. Like, I want to say the combined weight of that thing, including the stand, is probably approaching 250 pounds, which is okay. But when it's hanging off the side like that, if the machine isn't heavy enough, it's just going to tilt the whole machine over. You don't want to do that when you're trying to run a big piece of wood on there, etc. So most of those hobby / older machines probably can't support that weight like that on their countertop. So you might not see them on it. One of the really, really big benefits of using a shaper with a power feeder is the consistent feed rate that you can adjust so you can minimize burning, you can get the right amount of wood going through it at the right time and get a much cleaner cut. So I'll talk about that in the next one, but almost all of those are going to have a fixed spindle. So what do I mean about that? That means this spindle goes up or down and it doesn't tilt forward or backward. Most of those hobby / older machines are going to be in that category. They're probably going to be in the free range. I mean, believe it or not, there's some right now on Facebook Marketplace that are free right now, all the way through maybe $1,000, like something like that. Almost all of them are going to be an Asian brand. You're going to see things like Delta. Mostly older ones are Delta, lots of different Delta ones. Grizzlies, and then lots of names you've never heard of before, which is okay because in those Asian kind of markets, many of them are the same exact machine made over and over and over for 10, 20, 30 years, who knows. And there's not anything wrong with the fact that one has a name brand and one doesn't have one. I think the condition that the unit's in is more important than anything else. Now I want to get into something that's really important when you're looking at a used machine. Used machine, if it doesn't have what you think is the original fence, like this is the fence, I've got it tilted up right now just to show the whole back, but if it doesn't have what seems to be the original fence, I'd walk away. There's so many out there to pick. If it isn't complete and have all the things that you would normally see on it, I'd walk away. I want to just say that there's also new ones in this category too, but this is the weird part. If you're not comfortable with like fixing up a machine or cleaning it up or making sure it works right in the used market, then you're going to be the new person, which is perfectly fine. I'm that person for about half of the machinery that I own. So it's okay, but in that kind of category, I think you're looking at like 1,000 and less for those kind of machines. So which you might think is crazy. So I'm going to show you the next category. The next category, I want to call it serious hobbyist. Okay, so now these machines are definitely going to be more substantial. So the top on the machine is going to start approaching like that 24 deep, maybe by even 38, 40 inches wide. And they're almost always going to be considered cast iron ones. They're going to have larger spindles. So you're going to stop seeing the 3/4 inch spindles and you're going to start seeing 1 inch, 1 1/4, that kind of stuff. And sometimes even bigger. Why would you want bigger? The bigger the spindle, the less vibration, the bigger the cutter head you can run, the better the finish you're going to get. Okay? Less burning probably too. More power here. These are all going to be the 3 to 5 horsepower kind of machines. They're going to be 240 volt. But in this category, I'm going to call serious hobby. I'm not going to say 3-phase. These are probably all going to be single phase 240 volt machines. Still probably going to have a fixed spindle that doesn't tilt. It will go up and down. And then these ones definitely are power feeder possible. Most of these, they don't have a little side piece like this out here, but they'll be drilled into the top just like here. You can see there's 4 holes that Felder put there. Maybe if I zoom in later. But some of them will already be pre-tapped for a power feeder, which then it was made to be able to support a power feeder there. Most power feeders are not that big. Most power feeders are smaller than that. And if you're buying that kind of a machine, I think a 3-wheel power feeder is probably the appropriate power feeder for it. And they're all different kinds of sizes and shapes. If you can find a used machine out there that's in this category, most of the time, you're not going to get a massive premium selling it with a power feeder. Most of the time, the power feeder might just be like an extra that comes with it. They may get $100 maybe more or something for it, but it's not going to be crazy because if you go and look online, what power feeders cost, power feeders new aren't cheap. So something to think about. Now in this kind of space, there's a lot. There's a lot of used, there's a lot of new. And these machines in this category, like the hobby and the serious hobby category, you can get those probably off the shelf most of the time. So maybe it has to be shipped and it takes a week or 2 or something like that. Or you might even be able to go down to like a Rockler or Wood, whatever, and find it there and be able to take it home. So these are almost always Asian, some European, some older US stuff. Brands here are going to be like Jet, Laguna, Powermatic, Cantech, maybe the lowest Cantech. SCM Minimax, like the lowest SCM Minimax for new, but then there's going to be a ton of older SCM and Minimax in this space. You're going to find Hammer ones probably in this price range, the lower Hammer ones, which are a lower or entry-level Felder machine. And then Oliver, new and old, probably in that space. These machines can do really good work, like long-term. And again, these are like $800 used up to like maybe $5,000 new. So there's a lot in that lower end sweet spot. There's a ton always of older SCM machines out there. 110s, 120s, if you look, you'll see them. And people call them bulletproof, and they kind of are. You might have to replace a bearing on them or something like that if you're comfortable doing that. But again, I'm going to still ladder back to what I said before. If it's missing its fence or it looks like it's got something someone built or created, I'd probably wait to the next one. In these first two categories, maybe the next category, I follow what my brother says to me a lot. In the used market, it's just a waiting game. At some point in time, what you're looking for is going to come up. In the last quarter category I get to, the wait could be so long you would give up. So anyways, in that serious hobby space, you could do a lot of great work, but you're probably going to be limited to cutters like these first two. So you're going to see like these brazed cutter heads, which are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They work great. And then you're going to see some insert ones like this right here. Maybe something a little shorter, a little wider. But again, these aren't the beefiest machines unless you find some of those older machines that are used to run the bigger cutter heads like I've got on the back side over there. Okay, so that's our first two. Third one, I'm going to call industrial / full shop kind of machines in the analog format. So in these beefier machines, you're going to find two kinds. And you're going to find two kinds of people that are running those kind of machines. People that don't want any electronics. Like they don't want that screen right there to fail and cost them a ton of money while they're doing a job. Because if that goes down while you're doing a job, the rest of the machine doesn't work. And so time is money when you're doing this, like as a real job. So a lot of people like the really robust machines, but fully analog. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, especially if you're going to set it and forget it. A lot of people do one thing on a shaper. They buy multiple shapers, and that one shaper does one thing for its whole life. They set it and forget it, which is perfectly fine. So now these machines are going to be much heavier built machines. These are going to be like a minimum of 1,000 pounds. And when it comes to these shapers, how heavy they are minimizes vibration, and less vibration in a machine, the cleaner the cut. It's just automatic. And so when it comes to a really complex like cut that you're making, like whether it be for a piece of molding or for anything like a raised panel or whatever, when you do some kind of a crazy OG or whatever you have kind of design on that, you don't want to have to sand that. Like sanding it, those intricate spaces is going to basically take away from the look that you want, which is clean, crisp edges out of that stuff. So these machines are going to be much heavier, and you're going to have to get much more creative if you're buying a used one to get it home to your shop. These are all going to have from 30 millimeter up spindles. So 30 millimeter spindle is like the European standard of a spindle, and then it just kind of goes up from there. So you're going to see 30 millimeter and then 1.25 inches, which is kind of the US standard. So most of the machines that are in this category can do either of those spindles. And then you'll see bigger ones, 40 millimeter, 50 millimeter. Well, why would you want a 40 millimeter or 50 millimeter spindle? Well, when you're running a big cutter like this that probably weighs, I'm guessing 15 pounds or something like that, they're steel cutter heads. That's got a 40 millimeter diameter in it, and you need something robust to be able to spin that at the speed you want and get a clean cut. And so you'll see those machines have interchangeable spindles. So this would be my first category where I would say you'll see a lot of these machines where this spindle is interchangeable. Some easier than others. Some of them take longer, this machine maybe, and some of them take less time. You probably won't see the sophisticated stuff like an HSK spindle on these yet because, again, these are the analog versions of what I'm talking about. So, excuse me, just because it's analog doesn't mean it doesn't have displays on it to help you set them up. Some of them have analog digital displays, so like they rotate, etc., in the base of the cabinets with all of the controls for power, for reverse, for the changing the speeds, those things. And then some of them are going to have that same analog setup on the actual fence to be able to adjust the fence in and out and to know how much you're taking off, because you can use these as what I'd like to refer to as a joiner. So you're taking off some of the wood as you're making that kind of profile, which gives you for a really clean cut. These ones are definitely gonna add some tilt. So some of these machines in this category will be able to tilt the spindle, sometimes 45 degrees back to 0, some 45 back to 5 degrees plus. That's what this does. Some of them 45 back and 45 forward. So it's definitely a great feature to be able to have a tilting shaper, only if it's robust enough to do what you want it to do when it's actually in that straight up and down space. And when you're doing really, really big cutter heads like talked about back there, or even bigger, there's much bigger cutter heads than that, you want that spindle to be rock solid. And sometimes a fixed shaper can do a better job of that until you get to the highest of high, best tilting shapers. So power feeds on these should be expected. Like that would, in this kind of a machine, you wouldn't run the machine without a power feeder. Like you'd do test cuts probably without a power feeder. You'd probably do like some tenoning work on the front like this slider does without a power feeder. But pretty much everything else you'd want to run the power feeder. These are definitely going to be higher power machines. These are going to be like probably, if it was old, maybe you'd find something down in the maybe 5 horsepower range, but most of the time these are going to start at 10 horsepower and up. Most of these are going to be 3-phase machines. So most of these are going to require you to have either a phase converter or be in a shop that's got like 3-phase power. Good for you if you have that. Sometimes you can find some of these machines used pretty inexpensive. I'd say like $3,000 maybe sometimes, but these will go from $3,000 like used to in the $20,000 area if you're buying new, okay? Way more features in these machines, way more safety features in these machines, and most of these are gonna be European, okay? Now I'm gonna go back to number 1. The first machines, the hobby ones, they might have a couple of speeds and they'll definitely be done with some kind of a belt change. The serious hobby ones will get you probably to 4-speed machines. So I know that a lot of people don't think about this with a router, but when the cutter head's larger, so when you get to a cutter head that's this big, it doesn't run at a super fast speed because as those cutters get farther away, the tip speed is faster than at the same given speed of the spindle than if the cutter was in closer. So where you're used to a 20,000 RPM little teeny like router bit, well, when that starts to move out to a bigger dimension, this one, you might want to run this at like, I don't know, 4th. So the minimum on this particular cutter is 3,700 RPM and the max is 7,200 RPM. So you'd run that one somewhere in the middle. You might pick the speed on your shaper that's maybe 5,000 RPM, whatever that looks like. But as you move up from the serious hobby, you might have 4 speeds. Most of these industrial full shop ones are gonna have 4, 5 speeds. Some of them might even have variable speeds, completely variable speeds. But I called this the analog category. So usually that's where people want to stay away from electronics. They just want the unit to work. So most of these won't have variable speed spindles or variable speed motors inside of them. There's going to be in these particular machines way more safety features. So you won't be able to, if you lock out the spindle, it's going to have a little switch there that's going to tell the machine you can't turn the machine on. If you open up the door, it's going to tell the machine you can't turn the machine on with the open door. Most of these machines are definitely going to be focused more on safety. So for the industrial full shop analog machines, this is going to be like Felder, SCM, Cantech, Ironwood, Powermatic, like the higher end kind of Powermatic. And this is where, now the rest of these are all going to be used. Martin used, and if you find a Martin shaper for under 20 grand, it's in good shape, good for you. Hoffman used, these things are beasts from Europe. Panhans used, beasts from Europe. Grigio, older, good machines, but no part availability on those anymore. So those are kind of a little scary, but those are like, all of those machines are like really, you own one of those machines, you will appreciate how nice it is to work with a machine that like is really built well to good tolerances and is beefy, has a good sized table, easy to work with. Now to the top end machines. Now these are the machines that are kind of next level. When you work with them, they're really a pleasure to work with. And when you hit that space and you get to interact with them like I did last week, you'll know what that looks like. These have the largest footprints. So some of these are going to be twice the size of the machine behind me, and some of them will have as an option to the left side of the machine a sliding table that's all cast iron that will let you do really large pieces and do mortising with them with a separate mortising, tenoning, do tenoning, not mortising, and have a separate tenoning hood, and they can run like really big cutter heads to do really deep tenons. And that's the category you're going to find for these. They're going to have all kinds of really amazing options. These are going to have a ton of electronics in most of these, and you either have to be okay with that or probably step back to the analog ones. There are some analog ones out there that do have those extra features, but there's only a few. There's not much to pick from. These are definitely going to be the 10 horsepower and up kind of machines. You might find a random European machine that's 9 horsepower because of, conversion of kilowatts to horsepower, etc. But most of them are going to be 10 horsepower or more, some 13, some 15 horsepower. And again, why do you need that kind of horsepower? When you got a cutter head that's even bigger than that one that I have on the end spinning, and that thing might weigh 20 pounds, you want the power behind it. These are all going to be 3-phase machines. The previous one, still mostly are going to be 3-phase. You might find a single one in there every once in a while. These are all going to be 3-phase machines. They're also going to be different voltages. 240 volt, 400 volt, 440 volts, and 480 volts. I'm going to tell you why this is important. You might find some of these machines on eBay or somewhere else, and you might find it as used and you think it's a great deal. There's currently one that I had looked at that looked pristine, like a great deal. When you deep dive a little farther into the machine tag, you find out that it's a 50 hertz machine. So if you live here in the old beautiful US, our electrical system is built on 60 hertz electricity, so 60 cycles per second. In Europe, it's 50 cycles per second, which you think is no big deal. But with a shaper, it can be a big deal for a couple of reasons. Sometimes electronics don't want to work very nicely at 50 hertz. And they're made for 50 hertz working at 60 hertz. And then secondarily, the motors are going to spin at a different speed. So if you look at the machine and it says that it's got 6 speeds, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 7,500, all those different speeds, well, those aren't the speeds it's spinning anymore. If it's a 50 hertz motor spinning at 60 hertz, it's actually 17 to 18% faster. So when you think it's spinning at 6,000 RPM, it's really spinning over 7,000 RPM. You could run into putting a cutter without having like a sheet listed all the time, faster than you should be running the cutter, or slower too, who knows. But then the other part of it is those machines, those motors that are intended for 50 hertz and not sold to go into a 60 hertz market are probably going to run hotter at 60 hertz than you want them to. And so machine longevity could be an issue too. So you got to really pay attention to the frequency of the machine. You definitely want a 60 hertz machine, I think, if you're buying used. And then if you're buying new, hopefully it's 60 hertz. But then you got to also understand that if the machine is made for 400 volts, which many European companies are now going to across the board, just making 400 volt machines and then giving you a transformer to use with it, that's cool, it works. But if you're buying it used and it doesn't have the transformer, you're going to have to buy that transformer, which is probably going to be a couple of $1,000s. So just be aware of that. Now, if you're in an industrial setting and you get 480 volts right to your shop and the machine you're buying is 480 volts, perfect. But just be aware of that. That's an important thing. Now the spindles here are gonna actually start including mostly interchangeable spindles, almost all of them. Different sizes like I talked about before, but then you're gonna get other ones that are HSK. So what's an HSK spindle? They're used a lot of times in the CNC spaces. CNC machines use them all the time. And they're really built for machines that have tool changers on them. So you basically click a button and then the actual spindle can pop right off with the cutter head still on it. What's the benefit? If you have a lot of money and you don't care, you could have multiple cutters. All the cutters that you own could be on a separate HSK spindle. And then when you want to do a tenon, when you want to do a finger joint, you can just pull that one on, put it in your machine, and there you go. You're set to go. Remember, almost all of these machines now in this category are going to be programmable, like this one behind me. So I can go into the screen, I can tell it what cutter head I have, and then it'll automatically set up all the dimensions and move it to wherever I want to do based on the cut I'm going to make. So if you have interchangeable spindles, that can be kind of cool, but those spindles are not free, okay? Secondarily, these machines, because they have replaceable spindles, many of them have the ability to run a router bit. Big router bits, small router bits, whatever you want to do, but they can run router bits too. And here's the thing you really need to be careful about. On this particular Felder machine, this Format 4, because it comes with this extra fence on it, this Eigner integral fence that's very thick, the way that this machine's built, the fence can't go back far enough to use a router bit the way you want to use a router bit. Now, okay, the challenge here is that interchangeable spindle for this machine, for a router bit, is almost $2,000. And that's a lot. So other machines that are out there are able to move the fence back far enough so you can use it almost like a router table. And then you can lift the fence up like this, but then if you're gonna have to put in some like random wooden fence or something like that to use it on a very expensive machine. Just seems counterproductive. So just know what the machine does. Ask all those questions before you're gonna buy anything like that. They're all gonna have power feeders again at this space, but now they're gonna have better stands possible with them. Like this is what's called the Smart Stand that goes with these Comatic machines. And the cool part about the Smart Stand is that it's got a little display up here and you can program that display so you know, hey, and you can calibrate it. So one of my friends just taught me this. Calibrate it to like, hey, if you're gonna use 18 millimeter like wood, you calibrate it so when you move that thing to 18 millimeters, that's giving the correct pressure on that wood, which is kind of a cool feature. Then you go to even ones that are even more on top of that. Other companies also offer ones that are like fully automatic. They usually are on the opposite side near where that screen is. And they have an automated system where when you program it in, it programs the actual feeder. The feeder moves out, the feeder moves down. You can swing it away very easily. It's really well integrated, and it's also a really expensive option. So you can pick and choose. Most of the machines in that category, if you opt out of that kind of a power feeder, you still can put this kind of a power feeder on that I have. These are way more expensive machines, even used. These are gonna be, I know I'm gonna get like crucified for this, but these are $20,000 and up. I mean, these machines can be very expensive. One of the companies that I want to talk about here later, Martin, I mean, you're talking about if you load the machine up, you're talking about a 6-figure machine. Like this is a serious investment for anybody. They all are going to have touch screens and have programmability in this category. Very few left that have some kind of programmability that are down in the base of the cabinet. Almost all of them are going to be based on a screen up there at the top. incredibly heavy machines now. You're talking about 1,500 pounds to over 3,000 pounds for these machines. And that contributes to how clean the cut is. They just don't have any vibration. They're gonna have a ton of options available for them. So these machines aren't the kind of machines you're gonna get off, just pick up off the shelf and get it right away, unless you find it used. But these are going to be ones that are going to have lead times. You're going to order them a specific way. You're going to order specific features on it. You're going to order the things that you want, that you learn that you want. And they're going to take between maybe 3 to 6+ months to be built and shipped here, because almost all of these are European machines, universally European machines. Just be ready that if you think you're going to make it to this, you probably already know this if you're watching this anyway, and you're saying, Paul, we know this already. We get it. We've ordered these kind of machines before. But when you get to this kind of machine, you just got to understand very few are going to be available to just pick up and go unless you're finding a used one out there. What brands are these? Martin is definitely going to be, like in the US at least, the top of the line kind of shaper you're going to find. Most expensive, most well thought out, probably has all kinds of different followings and features. There's arguments back and forth. Some people can't find the value in a Martin. I'm not going to argue back and forth. That's for someone else to argue about. I'm sure you'll be in the comments all arguing right now. I don't think I've worked with like 7 or 8 Martins now at this point. They are really great machines. No one can take it away from them. SCM is also going to be in this category for their normal machines that they make. They make Minimax. They make SCM machines. They call class or whatever machines. These are the T series ones. And then they make also SCM Law Invincible, like the 2 other machines I have. And those machines can get very close to that top end of, getting close to 6 figures for a machine. Pon Hans is also an amazing machine, made in Europe, not imported currently to the US, but you can find them in the US because they were imported before. These things are beasts, and they were really well made. I believe they've now been bought out by somebody and they're not importing them to the US, but still well made, and still a viable company in Europe. And then Hoffman, which with one F, there's 2 different Hoffman woodworking machines out there. Hoffmann is the one that does the little dovetails that I have that machine. And then Hoffmann, which makes like full-size machines like this, which are the shapers, etc. Now, they have a shaper that does something that no one else does, which actually will tilt the spindle to 90 degrees, so you can actually put multiple saw blades in it and cut reliefs and windows and things like that. Really, really neat machines. Again, not imported to the US, although you will find them used. You will find them out here because they were imported right up until somewhere around COVID. Again, I would love it if they would bring that machine. And same thing for Pon Hans. I'd love it if they started importing them here, but they just don't make a lot of them. And so they have enough people in Europe and around the rest of the world to buy them from them, and they're selling them to them, choosing not to come to the US right now. But please, if you see this, come to the US, because competition is great. And then the top of the line Felder Format 4 is also in this category. So what I have, and they make a more expensive machine than what this is also. That doesn't push quite as high as like the SCM Law Invincible or Martin does in the price category and feature category, but getting there, for sure, getting there. These are the machines that you'll find in an artisan shop, or you find in a shop where somebody's doing really high-end work, and they value the time savings of what they do, what these machines can do for you. You won't find them in the shops that have 50 people working in them and they're grinding it out. You're going to find more analog machines in there because they're going to set the machine up for one process and one process only. These kind of machines are good for 1 or 2 people working together, where you need the machine to do multiple different things and to set up quickly, and that's what you do. So that's my rundown of all of these shapers. There are so many different options available for them that would take literally hours to go through. There's also all the different safety things that you can add on and all the different fences you can put on them and all the other things you can do. Again, I can't get into that. It's just way too much stuff. But I will say that I have made a decision though to get a second shaper. It won't show up here. It'll be something that I'll have in the new shop when I move there, which is like, 5-6 months from now, whatever that looks like. But I am going to get another shaper. It'll probably be a fixed spindle shaper. And like I said, I'm going to keep this as my tilt shaper. And that one will be the one that can run the bigger cutter heads, help me do doors and things like that with. I hope this was helpful. And I hope you got something out of this, if not my mumbling or whatever. And if you've got any questions, I hope you're asking them in the comments below, because I'll be glad to answer everything that I know. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I have been around a lot of stuff and I think I've got a good idea of what they do. And then I appreciate you guys getting on here. I appreciate you guys waiting for the videos sometimes. Hopefully I'll start to be able to do some more regular, but again, this move and all this other stuff that's going on is going to make it a little more challenging. I'll do my best. I appreciate you and have a great one.